All right, get ready to dive deep, because today we're tackling karma yoga.
Oh, yeah, karma yoga. Fascinating stuff.
And to guide us, well, we have the wisdom of Swami Vivekananda. We're exploring one of his lectures, specifically how karma yoga, it shapes our character, like who we become.
Absolutely.
And our main source for this deep dive is this amazing YouTube video I found.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's from a channel called Shravanam.org, and it features excerpts from, his complete works. Really good stuff.
I'm excited. Vivekananda, he's like the perfect guide for this. He really takes karma beyond this idea of, good deeds and bad deeds. And he shows us how it's actually a practical way to level up in life.
Yeah, and get this, he doesn't even see karma as some mystical force out there.
Right.
For him, it's all about action. Like the word karma itself comes from the Sanskrit kri, which literally means to do.
Oh, yeah. Every little thing we do is shaping who we are.
Right. So it's not about fate or destiny.
Yeah.
It's about taking responsibility, recognizing that every choice we make, it's like a brushstroke on the canvas of our character.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does that all tie into, actually building that character?
Well, Vivekananda, he believes that character is really formed by all our tendencies, the things we're inclined to do.
Makes sense.
And you know what shapes those tendencies? It's everything we experience, the good and the bad, the joys, and especially the suffering.
Yeah, that makes sense. We learn from our mistakes. Those tough times that force us to really dig deep.
Exactly. But Vivekananda, he goes even further, saying that in many cases, misery, it's a more powerful teacher than happiness.
Really?
Think about it. Poverty often teaches more than wealth, right? Those hardships, they build real inner strength in a way that comfort never could.
It's like those challenges force us to tap into hidden reserves of resilience, creativity, things we didn't even know we had.
I can definitely relate to that in my own life. Going through something really difficult, it made me grow in ways I never imagined. Have you had experiences like that? Where a challenge brought out some strength that was hidden?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? This leads us to another point that Vivekananda makes. He believes that all knowledge is already inside of us, just waiting to be unlocked. He uses the famous example of Newton and the apple.
Oh, yeah, right. The apple falling.
Exactly. The apple didn't have the knowledge of gravity, but seeing it fall sparked something in Newton, right? Yeah. A connection, that aha moment where he was able to tap into knowledge that was already there within him.
So it wasn't new information. It was just like a trigger to connect with what was already inside.
Exactly. And our experiences, they act as those catalysts, sparking those aha moments. So those aha moments, they're helping us tap into this well of knowledge that we all have. Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, karma, in its broadest sense, is every single mental and physical experience we have.
Yeah.
It's the fuel that ignites our inner fire, pushing us to discover who we really are.
You got it. Every thought, every breath, every interaction is shaping us. It's like a tiny wave on the seashore, but together they can reshape the entire coastline.
Wow, okay. So we're constantly creating karma, huh? So then, are some actions better than others? Do our motives for doing things actually matter?
Oh, absolutely. That's a big part of it. Vivekananda talks about all sorts of motives, fame, wealth, wanting to leave a mark on the world, even just trying to make up for past mistakes, but where he sees the real magic happening.
Yeah, where is it?
It's in working without any selfish motives at all.
Really?
It might sound kind of counterintuitive, but that's where he says true power and growth comes from.
Okay, I think I need a minute to process this. So he's saying that letting go of that, what's in it for me, and just doing good for the sake of doing good, that's when we unlock a deeper part of ourselves.
Exactly. It's like that analogy he uses of a coachman controlling a speeding carriage. The real skill isn't in letting the horses run wild. It's having that discipline to hold them back, steer them with precision.
It makes sense. If we're always chasing after something, we're never really in control. But if we can let go of those attachments, that's where we find real power and freedom.
And here's the thing, he even says unselfishness is more paying. It's the biggest show of power there is. So it's not that we get nothing out of it, it's just a different kind of reward, one that's more about inner strength and character.
I love that. So it's like we're investing in ourselves, but the payoff is something way more lasting. Okay, but how does this all connect back to karma yoga?
Karma yoga is putting this into action. It's consciously choosing to act from selflessness, shifting our focus from what's in it for me to how can I serve.
So it's not just what we do, but why we do it, the intention behind it.
Precisely. And the amazing thing is, practicing this, working without selfish motives, it changes us. Vivekananda believes it's the key to developing insane willpower and building a strong character.
He even uses Buddha and Jesus as examples, right? I mean,
Yep.
they clearly had amazing willpower, huge influence on the world, but their fathers were just ordinary guys, a carpenter and a king. So where did that strength come from?
It's a really good question. And Vivekananda, he suggests that maybe, just maybe, it was a result of lifetimes of selfless work, of always choosing actions that helped others above all else.
Wow, that's heavy. It suggests our actions have this ripple effect, that goes way beyond what we can even see. And by choosing selflessness, we're not just helping someone in this moment, but contributing to something much bigger that can even inspire future generations.
It's a beautiful idea, but it definitely makes you rethink your own actions, how you approach work, how you approach life.
Yeah, it totally changes what we think of as success. It's not about what we get, but who we become through our actions.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it leads us to something a lot of people struggle with when reading Vivekananda. He seems to be emphasizing both intense action and peaceful renunciation. How do we balance those two things?
Yeah, that is something I was wondering about too. It feels like a paradox. On one hand, he's saying we should be fully engaged in the world, taking action, making things happen. But then he also talks about letting go, renouncing our attachment to the outcome of our actions. So which is it?
That's where it gets interesting. Vivekananda's ideal is actually finding that balance between the two. It's about finding intense activity within stillness and calm amidst chaos.
Wait, so it's not about physically retreating from the world, but about cultivating an inner state of peace and focus that lets us move through the world without being swept away by it.
You got it. He's talking about a way of being where we can be fully present and engaged with all the ups and downs of life, but without losing our center. Does that sound familiar at all? Anything you've been noticing out there?
You know what? It does sound a lot like mindfulness. Being present in the moment, fully engaged in whatever you're doing, but not letting all the distractions and anxieties pull you away.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that leads us to the core of putting karma yoga into practice. It's not passive. It's about actively shaping our character through conscious action and that shift towards selfless motives.
Okay, but how do we actually do that? Sounds kind of abstract. How can we take this philosophy and make it real in our everyday lives?
Well, it's a journey, for sure, not a destination. But Vivekananda gives us some practical steps to take. He says it all starts with awareness. Just start noticing your actions, big or small, throughout the day. And ask yourself, what's the motive behind this? Are you doing it for recognition, for personal gain, or is it coming from a place of wanting to serve, to bring something good into the world?
That's a great place to start. But what happens when we realize, oh, my motives aren't as pure as I thought? How do we change that? Especially if it feels like we've been on autopilot for so long.
One step at a time. Don't try to change your entire life overnight. Start with one small thing each day. Choose a task, anything really, and do it with the intention of serving something bigger than yourself, even if that bigger thing is just bringing some joy into someone else's day.
I like that. So instead of just going through the motions, we're bringing that conscious awareness to what we're doing. Can you give an example of what that might look like?
Sure, let's say you're cooking dinner for your family. Instead of seeing it as just another chore to check off the list, approach it as an act of service. Really put your heart into making a delicious, healthy meal, focusing on the joy it'll bring to your loved ones. Not because you want praise, but just because you want to give.
Oh, that's a great example. So it's not about the task itself. It's about the energy and intention we bring to it.
You got it. And, as you practice this, even with small things, you start building that selfless muscle. And as it gets stronger, you can expand that awareness to other parts of your life, your work, relationships, hobbies.
It's like we're training our brains, shifting from that me focus to a we focus. But does this mean we have to give up our own ambitions and goals?
That's a common misconception. Vivekananda isn't saying we have to become monks. He's talking about a balanced approach where we're fully engaged in the world, following our passions, but with a sense of detachment from the outcome.
So not becoming passive, but finding a way to pursue our goals without being so attached to the results.
You got it. It's about doing the work because it's meaningful to you, because it aligns with your values, not because you're desperate for success or recognition. And in that detachment, that's where real freedom lies.
It's like we're tapping into this deeper well of motivation, one that's not driven by ego or the need to prove ourselves to others.
Powerful stuff, right? And when we connect it back to the big picture, it really challenges that typical Western focus on individual achievement and material success.
It's a whole different perspective, valuing inner growth and contribution over personal gain.
And ultimately, it invites us to ask, what does success really even mean? What if it's not about the money or accolades, but about the positive impact we have and the kind of character we develop along the way?
I love that.
Yeah.
Shifting the focus from external validation to a deep sense of inner fulfillment.
And Vivekananda emphasizes that practicing karma yoga is not about becoming passive or detaching from the world. It's quite the opposite, really.
Wait, so it's not about renouncing all worldly possessions and retreating to a cave.
Not at all. He's advocating for a balanced approach, one where we engage in the world with full vigor while simultaneously cultivating a sense of inner detachment from the fruits of our actions.
So it's like being in the world but not of it. Being fully present and active, but not letting the ups and downs control us.
Exactly. It's like that saying, do your best and detach from the outcome. We put our hearts into our actions, but we don't get caught up in the results, whether it's success or failure, praise or criticism. This detachment actually allows us to act with more clarity and focus, and ultimately to be more effective.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into karma yoga. It's not just some ancient philosophy, but a practical roadmap for shaping our character, our actions, and ultimately our reality. We've explored how karma is more than just some cosmic scorecard. It's about taking ownership of the fact that we're constantly creating ourselves through every choice we make. We've seen how shifting our motives from what's in it for me to how can I serve can unlock incredible power and lead to a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment.
It's been a pleasure diving into this with you. And remember, this is just the beginning of the journey. The real magic happens when we take these ideas and start experimenting with them in our own lives.
So to all our listeners out there, we challenge you to start paying attention to those little whispers of intention behind your actions. See what happens when you bring a little more consciousness, a little more selflessness to your everyday life. What kind of ripples might you create in the world? And who knows, you might just unlock a whole new level of yourself in the process. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
He sees the real magic happening when we work without any selfish motives at all.
Really, no selfish motives.
Yeah, I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, but that's what he says. That's where the true power and growth come from.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand this. He's saying that by letting go of that what's in it for me attitude and just doing good for the sake of goodness.
Right.
That's how we unlock a deeper part of ourselves.
Exactly. It's like that analogy he uses about the coachman controlling a speeding carriage. The real skill isn't letting those horses run wild. It's having the discipline to hold them back, steer them.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like if we're always chasing something, we're never really in control. But if we can let go of those attachments, maybe that's where the real freedom is.
And get this, he even says that unselfishness is more paying. It's like the greatest manifestation of power.
Wow.
So it's not like we get nothing out of it. It's just
Yeah.
a different kind of reward, one that's more about inner strength and character.
I love that. It's like we're investing in ourselves, but the payoff is something, way deeper and more lasting.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does all of this connect back to karma yoga?
Well, karma yoga is about putting all this into action.
Okay.
It's consciously choosing to act from a place of selflessness, shifting that focus from what's in it for me to how can I serve?
So it's not just what we do, but why we're doing it, the intention behind the action.
Exactly. And what's amazing is that practicing this, working without those selfish motives, it actually changes us. Vivekananda thinks it's the key to developing insane willpower and building a really strong character.
He even uses Buddha and Jesus as examples, right?
Yes.
I mean, these figures clearly had incredible willpower and influence on the world, but their fathers were ordinary men, right? A carpenter and a king.
Yeah.
So where did that strength come from?
It's a great question. And, Vivekananda, he suggests that maybe, just maybe, it was the result of lifetimes of selfless work. Always putting others first, choosing those actions that benefit others.
Wow. That's a powerful thought. It suggests that our actions have a ripple effect that goes way beyond what we can even see.
It does.
And by choosing selflessness, we're not just helping someone in this moment, but we might even be contributing to something much bigger, something that could inspire generations to come.
It's a beautiful idea.
It is.
But it definitely makes you rethink your own actions and how you approach your work and even how you approach life.
Yeah, it changes the whole definition of success, doesn't it? It's not about what we get, but who we become through our actions.
And I'm really glad you brought that up because it brings us to something a lot of people struggle with, when they're reading Vivekananda. He seems to be emphasizing both intense action and peaceful renunciation. So how do we balance those?
Yeah, that was something I was wondering about too. It feels like a paradox. On one hand, he's saying we should be fully engaged in the world, taking action and making things happen. But then he's also talking about letting go, about renouncing our attachment to the outcome of all our actions.
Hmm.
So, which is it?
That's where it gets really interesting. Vivekananda's ideal is actually finding this balance between the two.
Oh,
It's about finding that intense activity within stillness and calm in the midst of all the chaos.
wait, so it's not about physically like retreating from the world, but about cultivating a certain inner state of peace and focus that allows us to, move through the world without being overwhelmed by it all.
You got it. He's talking about a way of being where we can be present and engaged with all the ups and downs of life, but without losing our center. Does that remind you of anything? Anything that's kind of trending right now?
You know what? It sounds a lot like mindfulness.
Yeah,
Being present in the moment, fully engaged in whatever you're doing without letting yourself get carried away by all the distractions and anxieties.
exactly. And that leads us right to the core of how we can actually put karma yoga into practice.
Right.
It's not about being passive, but actively shaping our character through those conscious actions and, that shift towards more selfless motives.
Okay, but how do we actually do that? Like, how can we take this philosophy and make it real in our everyday life?
It is a journey. It's not, something you achieve overnight.
Right.
But Vivekananda, he does give us some practical steps. He
Okay.
says it all begins with awareness. Just start paying attention to your actions
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day, the big ones and the small ones. And ask yourself, what's the motive here? Like, am I doing this for recognition, for personal gain? Or is this coming from a place of like really wanting to serve, wanting to do some good in the world?
That's a great starting point. But what about when we realize, oh, okay, my motives, they're not as pure as I thought?
Right.
How do we change that, especially when it feels like we've been operating on autopilot for so long?
You know, baby steps. Don't try to change everything all at once. Start with just one small thing every day. Pick a task, anything, and approach it with the intention of serving something bigger than yourself. Even if that bigger thing is just, bringing a little joy to someone else's day.
I like that. So instead of just going through the motions, we're bringing this conscious awareness to what we're doing.
Yeah.
Could you give me like a concrete example? What might that look like?
So let's say you're cooking dinner, right, for your family. Instead of seeing it as just another chore you got to do, approach it as like an act of service. Really put your heart into it. Make it delicious. Focus on how much your family's going to enjoy it. Not because you're expecting praise or gratitude, but simply because you want to give.
That's a great example. So it's not about the task itself. It's about the energy and intention we bring to it.
Exactly. And, as you practice this, even in those small ways, you start to develop this selfless muscle.
Ooh, I like that. The selfless muscle.
And as it gets stronger, you can start expanding that awareness to other parts of your life, your work, relationships, your hobbies even.
So it's almost like we're retraining our brains, right? Shifting from that me focus to a we focus. But does this idea of selfless action mean we have to, like, abandon our own ambitions and goals?
That's where I think some people get tripped up.
Yeah.
Because Vivekananda, he isn't saying we have to become monks, renounce everything and go live in a cave. He's actually promoting this balanced approach where, yeah, we're fully engaged in the world, pursuing our passions and goals, but with this sense of detachment from the outcome.
So it's not about becoming passive, but about finding a way to pursue those things without being so attached to the results, whether we succeed or fail.
Exactly. It's about doing the work because it's meaningful to you, because it lines up with your values, not because you're chasing success or recognition. And that detachment, that's where the real freedom is.
So we're talking about tapping into a deeper source of motivation, one that's not fueled by our ego or that need for external validation.
It's powerful stuff, right? And when we connect it back to the bigger picture, it really challenges that typical Western emphasis on individual achievement and material success.
Yeah, it's a different way of looking at things, one that values inner growth and contribution over, like, personal gain.
And in the end, it asks us to redefine what success even means. What if true success isn't about money or recognition, but about the positive impact we have on the world and the strength of character we cultivate?
I love that. It's like shifting the focus from outward validation to a deep sense of inner fulfillment.
Exactly. And that's, I think, the essence of karma yoga. It's about taking action. It's about engaging in the world, but doing so with this awareness, with this intention of service. It's about recognizing that every choice, every action shapes who we are, shapes our character, and ultimately shapes the world around us.
This has been such an incredible deep dive into karma yoga. It's not just some ancient philosophy, but a practical roadmap, for shaping our actions, our character, and ultimately our reality. We explored how karma is way more than just a cosmic scorecard of good deeds and bad deeds. It's about taking ownership of the fact that we're constantly creating ourselves through our choices. And we saw how shifting our motives from what's in it for me to how can I serve can unlock this incredible power within us and lead to a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment.
It's been amazing exploring all this with you. And remember, this is just the beginning. The real magic starts when we take these ideas and start experimenting with them in our own lives.
So to all our listeners out there, we challenge you to pay attention to the intentions behind your actions. See what happens when you bring a little more consciousness, a little more selflessness into your everyday life. What kind of ripples can you create in the world? And who knows, you might just unlock a whole new level of yourself along the way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.